Firstly, how did you become a photojournalist? Can you, tell me about your journey into photojournalism?
Well, I didn't start out in a traditional way in photography. So I studied an undergraduate degree in economics and finance. And then I went into work with the investment banking in the City of London for many years, nearly a decade, actually. And there came a point when I knew that wasn't going to be a lifetime career. I didn't really want to spend the next 30 or 40 years of my life doing that. Big respect to people who do it, but it really didn't suit my personality in the longer term, although I did enjoy the time that I had there. So I was always looking, what is it that I could do if I'm not doing this? And I had started to study a little bit in the evening, printing and photography. Although I would just class myself as a hobbyist and nothing else. And then it was a time when the wars in the Balkans were ongoing, and somebody in the office said to me, there had been a particular massacre that had been reported, and because the Balkans conflicts were very close to Europe, on the borders of Europe at that time, now part of Europe, actually, the Balkans, a lot of them, and so we were. It really did impact on currencies when things were when conflicts sparked up, and so somebody asked me what this particular massacre would do to the price of dollar mark, as it was then, the Deutsche Mark. And I just couldn't understand that this person had taken this kind of collective human suffering and tried to find a financial gain from it. And that for me was it. So I didn't even sit down. It was the beginning of the day. I just walked in. I hadn't even sat down at my desk. And I just walked straight to my boss's office and I resigned and walked out of the bank. It was, those days, and probably still now, if you resign, you have to leave immediately. And so I left the bank, and 3 days later, I went to Kosovo to try to understand a little bit the conflict. And that really led me on a journey over a year in that region to, working and understanding what was really the root cause of that conflict. It was quite complex, still is quite complex. But one thing that came out of that process was that I started using a camera a bit more along this journey, and I knew at the end of it that I wanted to learn more about photography and narrative and how to build a narrative and understand how to use photography to create and engage with storytelling, policymakers and people around human rights issues. And so I went back to university and studied a postgrad in photojournalism at that time in London, and that was a year course. And during that year, I traveled to Sierra Leone as part of my school project or whatever it is, to see if I could start to document the impact that the conflict there was having on the population of Sierra Leone. And I did, and I was lucky enough to get access to some of the diamond mines that the Revolutionary United Front, as it was called, the RUF at the time in the 90s, were using to finance the conflict. Charles Taylor, Liberian president, Fodi Sanko, the leader of the RUF, and they were collaborating in extracting diamonds to finance their conflict and also amass personal wealth for themselves. And so I documented these mines and came back to Europe just at the time when the conflict in Sierra Leone was exploding. And I had the only pictures from inside these mines, and they were published in the Sunday Times magazine and many other places. I was still at university at that time. But that really defined an interest for me, which is to try to look, because of my background in economics and finance, look at the economics of conflict. How do conflicts become financed? How do they maintain the finance within a conflict to maintain the payments of troops, of weapons, maintain interest in that conflict? So it really started a journey for me, and this was back in '99, for me to really look at the use of natural resources within conflict. How do we use gold, diamonds, tin, tantalum, tungsten in many conflicts to finance those conflicts and amass wealth around them in order to prolong those conflicts and prolong the human rights abuses that are going on as a result of them. So that's really where it started and how it started. And that journey to Sierra Leone started my life in Africa, and I stayed there for many years, 20 years nearly.